Hi Christian, I'm going to give you some feedback on your first written exercise in English in this video. The way this works is that I have already marked and corrected and added to the text that you uploaded to iSchool. So you can go there and you can find your text and you'll see all of the changes and the commentary that I've made. So that serves for you to be able to see the errors that you've made, grammatical things, etc. And this video is going to give you some general feedback, things that I'd like you to consider in the future regarding the way that you write, your way of thinking about writing, whereas the corrections in the text is more to do with the kind of the localized issues. When you look at the text, you'll see that sometimes I correct things directly into the text, or directly in the text, and sometimes I give you things to consider, and then sometimes I give you questions in the commentary. It's all of those things I'd like you to go through and correct what you can correct, and think about the various questions that I've asked. If you see anything highlighted in yellow, it means that you've made that error previously in the text. So instead of me correcting it over and over again, I start to just highlight it in yellow. Okay, so that's how this works. For this video, I'm going to talk to you firstly about the general composition and the structuring of your text, how you've done that, and what I'd like you to do in the future, a little bit on the more localized level in terms of general errors, and then finally kind of going ahead, what can you do from that one. So firstly, you start out with an introduction, which is a very good thing. It's always very good to kind of frame the text in order to kind of invite the reader into the text, but also to make sure the reader understands what is happening. However, in this case, you are writing a specific genre for a particular publication. It's an article, and you're meant to imagine that it's for the British Army Review. So for that, we need a little bit more, or maybe a different type of introduction. So the reader needs to be kind of hooked, but also has to know what is going to happen. What are you going to be doing in this text with the topic that you are talking about here? So go back and look at that, and maybe go and look at articles to make sure that you understand the difference between the kind of academic essay genre and writing an article. Next thing is to do with your paragraphs. At times they're a bit short. Just keep in mind that the paragraph on the one hand has to be its own sort of complete unit with one general message and all the information that the reader knows to understand that message. But if we have two short paragraphs, the text appears fragmented. And that reflects on you as a writer, as someone who's not quite in control, or is not being thorough or elaborate enough about the different things you want to say. So have that in mind when you write, that something that is maybe 5, 6, 7 lines is on the short side. So just make sure that there is a reason why that paragraph is that short, and consider if you need to elaborate or you need to connect that paragraph with the previous or following paragraph. And that also leads me to talking a little bit about coherence. The opposite of a coherent text is a fragmented text. If you do have short paragraphs for reasons that are logical or for good reasons, make sure that you create coherence. Make sure that each paragraph obviously connects to the following, so that the reader always knows, why am I reading about this? How does that connect into the whole picture? So be critical when you read through your text. Try and have a reader perspective when you read through it. That makes it sometimes easier to spot whether or not your text is coherent. On a more localized level, I've given you a reference for a website. It's the Purdue University in the United States, to do with quoting. make sure that you know how to quote. The essence here is that you have 2 short quotes. And the rule with short quotes, and the definition of a short quote is something like 1 to 1.5, maybe 2 lines, is that has to be connected grammatically with your own text. So that has to become part of your own sentence. You can say, for instance, Edward Ludwig says, and then comes the quote, an unpleasant truth often overlooked, yada yada yada. If you quote beyond the 1.5 lines, it's what we refer to as a long quote, logically. That has to be separated from your text in terms of layout, and it has to be very clear that this is something that you're now quoting at length. And you can do that the way that you've done it. You've italicized it, and you have given it a more narrow margin, and you have used quotation marks. That's a bit much. Depends on what kind of style guide you read. For what I've been taught, which is one way of doing it, is that just make the shorter margin. You don't need the quotation marks, and you don't need the italicized writing, because when you've created a more narrow margin, that's enough for the reader to immediately identify this as someone else's text. And then obviously, at least obvious to me, is that even though you are quoting a text that I know, you still have to tell me who said this, where does this quote come from. So it's more to do with, I guess, kind of academic formality than anything else, but it's to say very explicitly, this is not my text, this is something I've taken from someone else. It's kind of giving credit where credit is due. But have a look at the website that I've given you there, if you have further questions. And then I'd like to also talk to you a little bit about what I'd like to call economy of effort. In this case, with writing, not in the military sense, but with writing. You write, I think, about 1,000 words, and I think some of them you can cut. I've suggested a paragraph that I think you might cut. Go and have a look at that and see if you agree with me. Because I don't think it really contributes to your main message. The way that I see it is that you're saying that proxy wars undercut Ludwig's argument. And what you need, of course, is to say, this is what Ludwig says, X, Y, Z, but proxy wars, which are, and then you define them and you give an example, they go against this in the following way. That's what I see that you do. And I'd like you to just stay focused on that and see if you can make your language, even at kind of sentence level, just focused a little bit more on what it is you're trying to say. Because it becomes a little too florid, I think the word is. It means that it kind of grows a little bit. So there is this main message, but it kind of shoots out in different directions, if that makes sense to you. And the effect of this is that the overall text becomes more vague than it needs to be. So try and write less is kind of what I'm saying in a nutshell. Doesn't mean that you have to write less content, but try and say what you want to say as precisely and as brief as you are able, without losing, of course, your message. This may be something that you need to do in your editing phase. It might be something that doesn't come naturally next time when you just write, kind of get into the writing. So maybe consider doing that next time as an editing thing. And what you might do is you can look at maybe 2 paragraphs and like really see if you can boil it down and get it really sort of to the point and really simple, without being simplistic. But simple in this case is a good thing, but simplistic is bad because you're making it, too simple. Have a go at that. If you want me, what you can do is you can give me kind of like a side note in the sense that I've worked with these 2 paragraphs to try and get that simple, precise writing. I can give you some direct feedback on that, and then it's fine that that you don't do it throughout the whole text. If you can't manage that, just let me know what you decide to do. Okay, so in the summation, try and be more, try and focus on coherence. Try and read your text as a reader would read it to make sure that there is coherence and a right thread. Try and be precise when you write, all the way down to the individual sentence level, and keep your focus. And one more thing, you may not know what the rules are for how to use commas in English. If in doubt, don't do it. We haven't spoken about this in class yet. I think we're going to have to at some point, because I see this is a problem for other people. If you don't know how to do it in English, just don't do it the way that we do it in Danish, because there are quite different rules, and also the rules in English are a lot more fluid, and it depends on American, British English. Sometimes, like a publication will have a way of doing their comma, others, a university would have another way of doing it, etc. So, if in doubt, don't do it. Okay? If you would like a grade for your paper, you can come and see me in class. If you decide that you would not like that, so that's also fine by me. That's something I leave up to each of you to decide. Yeah, but let me know what you think in class. Bye.